Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Overweight and
grossly overweight
and weren't always into fitness and stuff. So what was the kind of the catalyst for you? Was there a moment? Was there something that happened? Was there, what was that decision, that tipping point for you that kind of made you change your life? And what were you doing kind of, you Paul sort of mentioned, corporate life and stuff, but what were you doing and how did that change to what you do now,
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because I wish there was a more useful answer, because the story is relatively simple. I was moderately into health and fitness when I was a kid. I worked in the gym from 14 to 18, 19. And then I had my daughter when I was 19, 20, and discovered that being a gym instructor stroke lifeguard meant that I could teach my kid to swim, but I couldn't afford to feed her. So I quit and went and got a job in financial services at a time, mid-90s. If anybody wants to know what the financial services was like in the mid-90s, just go watch Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah. It was very easy to make a lot more money than a lifeguard makes. So I got stuck in a rut of doing a job that I didn't enjoy, but was paying me so much money that I was in it, and you just get stuck in that lifestyle. And with it came long hours and many burgers, basically. And before I knew it, I was just grossly overweight. And I told myself it doesn't matter because, well, first of all, as a bloke, you get an easy time of it. If you're a big fat bloke, especially if you're tall, you're just a big bloke. No one's walking around going, "You're fat." They're just going, "Oh, big Mark." They should have been saying you're fat, but they weren't. In fact, when I lost weight, people said, "Are you feeling okay?" I was like, "Hang on a minute, I'm still fat. What are you talking about?" So that's how I got into that state. Just too much money, too much burgers, and not enough enthusiasm to do anything different. And here's the frustrating part for people that want to know the answer to the what's the bottom of the barrel moment? What's the motivator? I've had a little bit of experience with people with various addictions. Mine is food, junk food. But I've been close to people that have had alcohol addictions and so on, and there's huge similarities. And the one thing that I've seen consistent with them and me is that the thing that finally, if it triggers them, because obviously many never get triggered to do good or to solve their situation, the thing is never what you think it would be. I've got a mate that doesn't drink anymore, has horrific stories about when he did that you think, wow, after waking up in that whatever dumpster, you must have thought this is the moment. But none of those things actually make a difference. People walk out of hospital with alcoholism and into the pub. Those things don't make a difference. For him, he went to buy beer in the rain one day and was thinking, this is nuts. I'm walking in the rain just to get beer. And that was the trigger. So for me, I don't remember what it was, but it would have been something as completely irrelevant as that. I had times where I'd have been up at 4 o'clock in the morning, throwing up because I'd spent all evening eating 9 Big Macs or something stupid, and telling myself, this is the moment, this is the point where I'll wake up tomorrow and be different. And I wouldn't be. I'd wake up and still have Cocoa Pops with chocolate chips poured on top. And then it would have been something daft that just, I don't remember what it was. I never remember what it is. I mean, even now when I have a little junk food binge, I'm now in a place where I can tell myself, keep cool, let the binge ride itself out, and there will be something that comes along and makes you think, okay, I'm back on it. And it can be anything. It can be listening to a motivation or a motivate. It can be listening to a song, just thinking, I feel good all of a sudden. That's enough. So the downside to that story is that for people that experience bottom of the barrel moments, those aren't necessarily going to be the thing that turns you around. I suppose the good thing to take from that is if you've had bottom of the barrel moments and it hasn't solved your predicament, don't think that means your predicament won't be solved, because solutions sometimes come completely out of the blue from you just wouldn't expect them. I get so many people say to me now, this happened to me, that happened to me, and I still can't get on top of it. Doesn't matter. Those weren't the things that were supposed to get you on top of it then. It could be a throwaway comment, or who knows what.
That's
What was
brilliant. That's number one. You said, to get yourself out of it, you listen to a song or something, and I've now got going around in my head "Sheriff Fat Man" by Carter and because you're 6'6" and 100 tons. Was it written about you? Like, honestly, it's like I wrote that down and I was like, wow. But the other good thing there is what you said. Not focusing on the what made you change and all that sort of stuff. You still struggle with it.
Oh,
you
God.
just said you are still that person, and you've got a junk food
addiction.
Addiction.
That's the word. The word is I have an addiction, and people sometimes sort of think, oh, yeah, I've eaten a few digestives too many as well. And when I explain, even today, what my junk food addiction is like, people then go, oh, okay, yeah, I don't have a junk food addiction, and I will happily, not happily, I will easily consume 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 calories in a junk food binge, even today. The only difference today is that I know that what I used to do, very, very simple. I would binge on a Saturday. I would hate myself on a Sunday and binge because of it. By Monday, I'm now about 4 kilos heavier and hate that. So I binge again. Before I know it, it's been a month. What I do now is I'll binge on a Saturday. I'll tell myself on a Sunday, doesn't matter. Every other time it's stopped, eventually that compulsion, I'll be back on it. And I feel all right about myself. Before I know it, it's Monday and I'm back in the gym and I can burn off the extra calories and I'm good. So by telling myself that it will be okay, I let the binge ride out. I don't know. There might be kind of eating disorder psychologists listening, thinking that's horrific advice. Don't anyone copy that. And they might well be right. But for me, accepting that it sometimes happens, probably 3 or 4 times a year, acknowledging that it's not the end of the world and it will end, works now. In the past, I just get bogged down in kind of self-hatred and just frustration, and that just leads to more binging. But no, it doesn't go away. If you're an alcoholic, if you're the trouble with food addiction is that you can't exclude food from, you can't be sober of food in the way you can with cigarettes and alcohol and other drugs and so on. So I could go to my kitchen now and do 10,000 calories. And so I have to not. Whereas if you're a smoker, you wouldn't have the cigarettes in the house. It becomes a bit easier to put those hurdles between you and the problem. And food is very, very hard to do that. Very hard. The other thing as well, it's important for people to hear, is that people talk about willpower a lot, and if you eat too much, it's weakness and all that sort of nonsense. It's really, really important that people understand that when you want, I mean, actually, willpower isn't a thing. It's not real. Your brain will tell you to do things and have complete control over you sometimes, and that's it. Full stop. You're not. For example, if I told you to hold your breath and you're not trained, some sort of free dive or something, you will breathe. Your brain will tell you to breathe before you need to. Just physically, you are in control of that. And in the same way, people say, "Oh, you're weak if you know you shouldn't eat ice cream, but you do." No, your brain is more powerful than you, clearly, because it's in charge. It makes you do things subconsciously or consciously that you might not want to do. That there's no weakness in that. Somebody saying, "Oh, I've got more willpower," you haven't. It's no different to saying you're taller than somebody else. Your brain is just not doing what their brain is doing.
For me, that comes down to motivation. You've always got motivation, and if there's ice cream in front of you, you've got the motivation to eat it or the motivation to not. It's one or the other. And the state you're in, that your brain is in at the time, if you're all happy and everything's going well, you might not and go, no. But if you're feeling a bit down or whatever, you're like, right, I'm going to go and eat that because you've got less energy because you are down. So you go, right. And then your body's craving fat and sugar and all that. So you go for it.
You have to, that comes back to habits. You have to create an environment where you're not likely to be exposed to that. Because I've stood in the kitchen at 2:00 in the morning, looking at the tub of Ben and Jerry's, full up already because I've already eaten too much. So I'm not hungry. This is nothing to do with hunger. Already maybe even feeling slightly ill. And not wanting to eat the Ben and Jerry's and eat in the Ben and Jerry's. It's nothing to do with the people that don't that haven't suffered those compulsions think it's about gluttony and hunger, giving into your hunger. It's not. I've eaten when I felt like I was going to throw up and still eaten. There's an amazing, in fact, actually asked about what was the trigger. I know one of my triggers, I watched the film Flight. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Flight with Denzel Washington. He's the alcoholic.
Is he the pilot? Who?
That's right.
Yeah.
He's a pilot and he crashes his plane. And basically the upshot of it is he ends up in court because he was drunk at the time. But no one knows he was drunk and he's going to get away with it as long as he can arrive at court the following day sober. And he, in his hotel the night before the hearing, he comes across the minibar and takes out one of the little shot bottles. And the camera lingers on the shot bottle and he walks away from it. And most people watching that would think, he's overcome his urge to eat it, to drink it rather. And therefore he'll turn up in court the next day and get away with it. And as someone that knew people that suffer with alcoholism, I knew exactly what was coming, which is he goes back and he takes a drink, even though it means he ends up in prison. It's nothing to do with being strong or weak, or if you find yourself in a situation where you're exposed, sometimes your brain will just do things that make absolutely no sense and you have no control over. So structure your life in such a way that you can avoid that if possible.
Yeah, there's such a powerful message, because I think
we're a long way from Broachford, aren't we?
I was actually, when you were talking about the food binges, I was going to ask you about Toblerones. If you're Alan Partridge fan, when he has his massive binge on Toblerones and he ends up.
I live in Reading. I live in Reading, which is 45 minutes at the very most from Heathrow. I've come back from holiday, landed at Heathrow, and done a couple of those giant Toblerone bars before I get home in the car. Easy.
Yeah, dear me.
Do you like the because they do? There's a milk chocolate one, but then they do dark and white chocolate ones.
Well,
as well.
it's true. I'm vegan now. I've been vegan for just over a year, so a lot of those old temptations are no longer open to me. So you can still very easily be fat and vegan, but Toblerone doesn't tick the box.
Okay, yeah,
fair enough.
I was all through duty free.
They changed it, didn't they? When they started putting them wider apart because they were putting less chocolate in because it was too expensive, wasn't it? When I thought
I'd just make it easier to kind of get a chunk up in your mouth.
Yeah, because you can never get your fingers in between to snap them off.
No, when you're driving with one hand and you want to snap a bit off.
I had that thing when I remember it must have been about 2008. I was watching the Daily Show, when Jon Stewart used to do it, and when
it was good.
It was kind of a time of the elections back then. And I remember just sitting there with a it was 2 a.m. because and it was a pint of beer. There was a massive bag of jelly sweets, and I had some biscuits there, and I was just sitting there eating it like it's 2 a.m, thinking, why the hell am I doing it? But I ate the entire thing. I had 2 packs of jelly sweets and I had a pint of beer, and I don't know, it's not a good combination, but I just felt compelled to eat it. There was nothing to do. I wasn't tired. I wasn't stressed. I was just doing it. I just kept stuffing it in my face. It's weird. I still have it imprinted in my mind. It's not like it was, I used to do that frequently. I look back and that was kind of just what I did. I would just frequently, just mindlessly just want these things and be compelled. And it's very overpowering. It's physiological, isn't it? It's just.
Yeah, well, you aren't, you just aren't in, I listen to Sam Harris podcast occasionally. He talks a lot about free will and whether free will even exists and so on. And it's actually quite beneficial because when you start to kind of really comprehend the idea that what your brain is doing is not really within your control, it becomes a bit, you kind of cut yourself some slack. If I ask you to think of your favorite movie, the movie that comes into your head, you can't tell me why that movie comes into your head. If I then say, well, pick another one, you can't tell me why that other one comes in. It's just thrown into your head by your brain. You're not kind of like going to some sort of backlog and flicking through index cards. Your brain is just throwing you information for reasons that you can't understand why. And so if it throws you, eat the ice cream, you don't know why it's doing that. It just is. And then it's strong enough because it's your brain and it controls you. So in some cases, make you eat it. I have huge sympathy for people that struggle with their weight. or indeed struggle with any kind of compulsion to do something that isn't very good for them. What I'm
so easy to access, though, isn't it? I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah, that's what I get frustrated by collectively our desire to ignore the fact that those compulsions are bad for you, but I have empathy for the people that suffer from them. So if you eat yourself to 30 stone, you have my sympathy. But if you are then the friend of the 30 stone person telling them that they're just cuddly and powerful when they stand on the beach in a bikini and everyone should see it, then you're enabling someone to self-harm. And quite frankly, you might as well be someone that hands a knife to someone that cuts themselves. So that I don't have a lot of time for. But the individual suffering from the compulsion, have my sympathy. I mean, I was there literally, and wished that people around me weren't saying, it's okay, you're just a big guy, you're big boned.
But what should you say? Because this is one of the things that people wrestle with. It's like, okay, how hard do you go? Because there's the tough love, there's the, hey, let's work through this, let's be softer. That's, I mean, what is
yeah, really, really hard. But what is it? It is so how far should you go? Really, really hard to work out. But what's easy to work out is, should we come back from how far we've gone in the other direction? Absolutely. And you could backtrack from how far we've gone in terms of sticking, obese, morbidly obese people on the covers of magazines and calling it fitness and so on. We could backtrack from that and still be very safely inside the realms of not getting into hard, tough love and so on. And literally taking obese people off the cover of a fitness magazine isn't tough love. It's common sense. So yeah, how far do you go? Tough one, real tough one. But do we back up from where we are at the moment? Absolutely. I mean, there's no question. Again, I use the term self-harm. If you saw somebody cutting themselves, if you knew someone cutting themselves, a child or something, you would think that person needs help, needs support. I need to intervene. You'd have all those sort of emotional responses to that, and you'd act accordingly. You see somebody eating themselves to an early death, actually a condition that's far more likely to cause an early death than somebody self-harming themselves, but by cutting, which is clearly a horrific situation, but doesn't often lead to death the way hospitals get filled up with people who have eaten too much. And no one calls that self-harm. No one even regards it as harmful. In fact, people go out their way to try and suggest it's anything but, and you're fine. You can be unhealthy by any sensible metric, and it's okay. It isn't. I mean, you can be it. If someone says, I want to be 30 stone, fine. I mean, there's a moral argument about, are you taking, whatever NHS resources and so on by being in that state in the first place. But I've used the NHS when I did an ultramarathon recently and almost gave myself a deep vein thrombosis. So I'm okay with the NHS occasionally intervening on people that have just been stupid. I'm not too bothered about that. So individually, if you want to be there, fine. But I think it's very, very dangerous for people to support people to be there. That just makes no sense to me. And I had it myself. I got far more negativity when I started to lose weight than I ever got when I was overweight. Even now, I'll tell family I'm running this 50k that I'm going to be running in a couple of weeks. Oh, really? Should you? Is that safe? Is it safe?
That's
it's
bad
safer,
for your knees.
Yeah, literally that. It's safer than 9 Big Macs at 2 a.m. I can assure you that. But no one.
Well, that's it. People get told they're on extreme diets when they're eating protein, good quality fat, and vegetables. I don't do this kind of extreme diet. I'm like, what? So like ready meals, Deliveroo, burgers, etc. I mean,
John Goodman talks about this. He puts it up in his thing all the time. He said people now, years ago, that was a normal diet. Now people get called a health freak by eating what normal people would have eaten 40 years ago. So
it's like fasting.
Meat and 2 veg.
Yeah. I occasionally do 24-hour fasts. And again, 10,000 years ago, you'd heard 24-hour fast because there wouldn't be any food to eat that day. It's no big deal. You find some food the next day. Human beings, we can clearly survive 24 hours without food. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And yet, if you do a 24-hour fast, a lot of people can't even get their head around the fact that you're not dead by 6 p.m.
Well, that's it. So, I mean, this concept of hunger is a big thing because, I mean, I think, you know, I speak to a lot of people and they're like, I'm just hungry, so I had to eat. And I'm like, well, what was going to happen between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m.? What do you mean by hunger? Because I'm not in your body. I don't know what you're experiencing. So when you're hungry, what are you experiencing? Because is it really hungry? You know, I mean, one thing I saw on YouTube said, like, if you're really hungry and someone puts some chicken in front of you, you'll eat it. But if you're not really hungry, you're probably not going to eat a protein. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, it's interesting. One of the benefits of doing things like 24-hour, I've done 48. In fact, I did over 50-hour fast once. One of the benefits of doing those fasts is that you learn that hunger comes in waves. So what you think is hunger, hunger, let's call it hunger if you want, but your brain is telling you that it's going to just build and build and build to starvation. Actually, what happens is after an hour it goes away, and you feel fine again. And once you know that, it becomes very easy. I often do intermittent fasting. If I'm not training hard that day, I won't bother eating until 2. I'll be, inverted commas, hungry at 9, 10, 11 a.m. But I know that by lunchtime, a big glass of water and it's gone. It's not hungry. And again, you want to see hungry people, they exist. I mean, they're easy to find all over the world, truly hungry people.
They're not fat, put it that way.
Yeah, they're exactly. Well, indeed. In fact, yeah, what isn't the world record for fasting? Something like 360 days by a guy that was grossly obese on day 1 and, you know, in reasonable shape when he walked out the other end and didn't eat at all for a whole year. So yeah, no human being that isn't looking very, very lean is going to struggle with, and even people that are lean. And we talk about lean, and again, it's easy to find people that are genuinely lean in troubled parts of the world. It's not Fat Fred in Slough that just hasn't had his KFC that day.
Yeah.
If you're called Fred in Slough and you're overweight, I apologise.
Or Bob from earlier.
Yeah. No, actually, I screw Bob.
But the one thing I think I can compare your channel to, it reminds me of, or the spirit of your channel is similar to Chris McDougall, you know, because he decides to take up wacky, crazy things or whatever. And like he's done ultra marathons, he got into barefoot running, he explored these things, and he came in, like you say, quite average. But from the reader's point of view, he seemed to be doing these extraordinary things that seemed beyond what I was capable of when I read his books. So I'm sure there's those people watching what you're doing saying, whilst you're above average, for them, it's this great spirit of adventure. I know that Chris McDougall wrote a book on running with a donkey.
Chris McDougall, he wrote Born to Run, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, that was the book. And when I first started running to lose weight, I had bad knees, bad ankle, bad everything. Everything hurt. I mean, I was 330, 40 pounds. So obviously everything hurt. I read his book, and it literally made me go out the next day and buy some Vibram 5 fingers and started running barefoot.
That's what happened to me.
Touch wood, I've never had a running injury that wasn't deliberately almost self-inflicted through stupidity since. My knees, my ankles, I'm fine. I'm a big guy. I run fast and I run far, and I'm fine because of that book. I know some of it got arguably debunked, but I don't care. I lived by that book, and it got me to. Yeah, got me to here. Literally, I wouldn't be here without having read that book. No,
I'm exactly the same. I would not be here without reading that book. That book, I read it in a week, and then I read it again. I read it slowly because I was trying to process it. And like you, I went out and ran. I ran around down my local street without my shoes on, and literally. And I can remember just how much my feet just felt weird. I couldn't believe the sensations. Yeah. It was weird, and I never looked back since then.
Yeah, no, I hardly ever. I'm not wearing shoes now. I hardly ever wear shoes unless I'm going out, and then there's zero drop minimalist. I mean it's it literally a book that changed my life. What I loved about it was because I've always liked this aspect of fitness. I love the rawness of it. I mean, I love all my tech and my gadgets and stuff, and the channel does well by talking about them. But there is something that I just really enjoy about me and my dog sometimes, going to the wood and running through the woods. It feels like something I could have done 10,000 years ago, or I could do today. I love that. In fact, when I used to work in a gym when I was 14 or 15, my plan, if I'd stayed in fitness as a youngster, was to write a book. The book was going to be called, this is quite funny because this is now 30, 40 years old, this idea. It's not all about the flashing lights, because this was at a time in the early 80s, I guess, when gyms were starting to get high tech for the time, running machines and ellipticals and stuff. And I'd have people coming in saying, oh, I don't want to do circuit training and burpees and press ups and stuff. We want to use the machine because it's got 5 LEDs on it. And I'd be saying, so what? And so I was going to write this book. It's not all about flashing lights, which is basically about how training needs to be made a bit more raw and a bit more, just natural, and don't get bogged down with the tech. And this was in 1984 or something. So clearly we've gone completely the other way. So I loved his message about those tribes, the
Tarahumara, yeah.
And I love that notion of, they live in one village and they want to get to the next village and it's 20k, so they just jog over there without a second thought, or 20 miles even, or even further. And I saw it when I traveled Africa on my motorbike. I'd be riding all day long, and I'd go past a guy walking, and he'd just be walking to the next village, because how else do you get to the next village? And it does remind you that actually, as human beings, we are supposed to be able to think, I'm here and I need to be there. I will set off walking and get there. We are supposed to be able to do that. So it's a little bit worrying if you can't do a park run, or you can't walk 10k. That, not that we should be kind of setting arbitrary limits, but if somebody does want to think, am I fit enough? Those are good ones. Park run especially. If you can't do a park run, it's a good measure of whether or not you should be considering upping your training a little bit. And so that book, Born to Run, and finding a park run, was for me eye-opening, because I thought, oh wow, I can't do what I'm really supposed to be able to do. That's a little bit concerning.
Yeah, what it is to be a human,
Yeah, and indeed, and in fact now, I mean, literally now, if you type in YouTube fitness, you will probably be met with an awful lot of people who are promoting a look and a way of training that is going in the direction of nothing to do with being a human being. I mean, bodybuilding is a classic example. Well, I got motivated by bodybuilding when I was younger. Everyone, in the 80s, everybody wanted to be Arnold and so on. But actually, but also then it was a bit niche. I mean, the fact that I wanted to be Arnold when I was 14, everyone thought I was a bit weird. If you're 14 now and you don't want to look like Chris Bumstead or something, people would think that was weird to not want to look like that. And you actually stop and think about it. Swelling your body up disproportionate to what any human being should really look like. It's a bit wacky, isn't it? It's a bit odd. It's kind of up there with those countries that kind of bind the kids' feet to turn them into ballerinas when they get older, by kind of effectively shaping them in a way they're not supposed to. That's really what bodybuilding is. You're not creating anything that's particularly useful. It's purely aesthetic, and it's fine, absolutely fine if that's your thing. But the fact that that's become fitness, that's become what we should aspire to, is bonkers. I mean, we should aspire to be able to go to the woods with your dog and run for half an hour. That should be aspirational. It shouldn't be whether your medial deltoid is slightly larger or disproportionate to your posterior deltoid. That, who the hell cares? But that is fitness. Fitness is that at the moment. I see youngsters stick up YouTube videos on how to whatever, develop their medial deltoid, and they'll get 10 times the views I get. And it's mildly frustrating. I understand it. I get it. I get why it works. And if you're the one churning out that content, good on you. You're making a good living. But it does frustrate me a little bit that kids are lapping that up and not anything that's actually a bit more truly fitness. I mean, for example, superstars. If you took all the stars or superstars from the 80s and you presented them today to our kids would think they're a joke. They would look at Daley Thompson's body, and he wouldn't even qualify for Love Island today with that body. He just looks like a regular guy, and yet one of the fittest people to ever live. But because he's not got massive abdominals and giant quad separation and stuff, people just think he's a nobody. We have very very strange idea of what fitness is. And it's nothing. You know.
Does he
Well, I
listen
saw
to
him
this
today.
podcast, Paul? Because
Yeah, I saw him.
Paul's studio's in Daley Thompson's gym, by the way, so he might be paying you a visit.
Oh, do you know what? I've used his photograph. He has a quite famous photograph, a promotional photograph of him lying sort of kind of semi-naked with his gold medals around him. And I've used that photograph a few times in my videos because he looks to me like what he was, an Olympic athlete, one of the fittest people walking the earth at that time. But anybody would have to admit, if you sent that photograph in as an audition photograph for Love Island, they'd laugh him out of the room because he doesn't look like what we now think fitness is.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like a flipping gladiator. I don't mean a real gladiator. I mean ITV 7 p.m. Saturday.
I did a post about this. I think I wrote a blog post when I used to write blog posts because I thought that was the thing. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was using Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Have you seen him in the first, like, was it 2000, the first?
Yeah, it was that far back. Yeah.
He looks like I do now, right? And I'm like, wow, brilliant.
Yeah.
But then in the last one, he's like not the Logan one, the last one when he was the younger Wolverine. He's so ripped, it's unbelievable. Yeah. But when you watch the first one at the time, that was kind of ripped, wasn't it? What's his name? Scott Bakula as well. If you remember Quantum Leap.
Yes. Yeah.
He was, all the lasses fancied him.
Yeah.
And he's there in a field in the 50s or whatever, digging a hole and all this sort of stuff. As he's obviously someone else, but it's him, and he's got his top off, and everyone's like, wow, look at that. You look at him now, and again, he looks like a hairier version of me.
Well, a perfect example of that is Baywatch. Baywatch in the 90s, David Hasselhoff was the slow motion hunk. Baywatch done today, it's The Rock and his truckload of steroids. That's the epitome of fitness.
I doubt he'd be a good swimmer.
Unbelievable. If you were drowning, my God, I'd rather have David Hasselhoff today try and rescue me than The Rock come anywhere near me. You might as well throw an anchor at my head and have that lump jump in. I mean, but that sums it up, doesn't it? And what's the gap between Hasselhoff, Baywatch, and we're only talking 20 years, if that. And we've gone from people like that. I mean, in the movies as well. You go back to the action heroes of the 80s. Bruce Willis in a dirty vest was the action hero. Bruce Willis in a dirty vest couldn't do Die Hard. That wouldn't work today because he doesn't look like what we want our action heroes to look like. In fact, quite how John Wick has got away with it is beyond me. In fact, I was actually quite pleased to see Robert Pattinson turn up as the new Batman. He's a kind of a skinny little vampire guy. And while I want my Batman to look still jacked, and I quite appreciate that it does show you don't have to look like the cast of the Expendables to get an action role. But still, most of them do. If you watch an action film today, they want that. Even Top Gun. I mean, that's a perfect example, isn't it? Top Gun got so much fitness content from YouTubers out of literally the beach scene, because what was Glenn Powell using to get as big as he did, and what was Miles Teller's shoulder workout like? When we watched Top Gun first time around, no one gave two hoots what anybody. I mean, just bonkers. I mean, no one cared. No one was saying, "Oh, what?"
Everyone was like, "Isn't that a bit weird? A load of greased up men playing volleyball on a beach."
Exactly. It was a joke, wasn't it? I mean, not to me. It was an amazing scene. Slider doing his little flex was inspired me for years to come. But most people regarded that as really weird, and yet now most teenage boys, primarily, because it's odd, teenage boys think that by looking jacked, teenage girls will look at them. Actually, what happens is other teenage boys look at them to get jacked. Teenage girls are presumably just waiting for them to all stop patting about and just take them somewhere nice. So teenage boys love that scene now and became fixated on it in a way that it became the scene.
This is how you can access a different demographic. You just need to the next video needs to recreate it.
How sad that the way to tap into our teenage boys' minds basically is by showing them unrealistic body images that the actors themselves said, you know, we dieted like crazy, dehydrated ourselves, slapped on some oil, had, you know, a few £1 million spent on lighting effects, and that's how we looked for an hour.
I think that'll be an interesting extended discussion is, you know, the role of like, how do you develop a sense of what it is to be a man or to be male in the current environment where you've got social media, and, you know, is there a generation of men who are underperforming, you know, who don't have direction, don't have purpose? Because I think there's so much out there, whether you see the Andrew Tates, you see all the other YouTubers, there's obviously films and things like that, everything from Marvel. There's obviously more computer games. There's more detachment from COVID, i.e., you know, people aren't hanging out with each other in the same way. People aren't talking. And that's going to have an imprint in a way that I don't think I can understand, because I kind of slightly missed that. You know, mobile phones were only just coming in as something when I was a teenager. You just send text messages, and there's so many different expectations on people now, isn't there? And I don't know kind of how it's addressed, or kind of what that means for society when you've got particularly young males not really having any kind of direction, I think.
No, I mean, it's tricky because so I was born in 73. So when I was sort of 15, so mid 80s, that sort of time, the only male bodies that I saw were the ones around me in my sports team or in my swimming club. It was, you know, I knew what my friends looked like, and so I had a realistic understanding of what other men looked like, because I literally saw them beside me in the gym, and that was my. Occasionally, I'd see a Rambo, or I'd see a Conan the Barbarian, but it was so occasional that I was able to put it to one side as exciting and fun, but also completely irrelevant to my life. What was relevant to me was, am I as fit and as strong as the guy that I go to the gym with, and he's my training partner. Now, you're right, because people are so removed from their peers, and they're stuck on their own in their bedroom. COVID obviously lended itself to that, and they are not occasionally exposed to a Dolph Lundgren or whatever. They are constantly exposed. My kids get up and over breakfast are flicking through TikTok. So literally not the first male body they see. The first male body they see is them in the mirror. The second male body they see is some Jack Numpty on TikTok. And that's the rest of their day. So yeah, they walk off to school already feeling less by 9 a.m. I mean, that's where those kids are at. My kids, lucky in a sense, because I really, really stay on top of that and drill into them, and they get to see things like high rocks. My middle son is 6'7" and struggles like I did because he's tall. He will never look as big and as jacked as his short little mates, because he's, the guy weighs 100 kilos but looks like he weighs 60 because he's so tall. So I've taken him to things like high rocks. He does my filming at high rocks, and he's able to see different, well, actually not different. He's able to see proper examples of fitness, and it comes in all shapes and sizes. And he's seen tall people and short people, and so he has, in the last 6 months, by being involved with high rocks, been exposed to what I kind of call real fitness, and it allows him to see and maybe still even be motivated by jacked guys on YouTube, but also know where they exist in the world, and it's not as the primary source of all aspiration, which is what a lot of his friends still think. And I go to my local gym here, and there'll just be teenagers in there if I'm ever unlucky enough to go there in the evening because of timings. It's teenagers in there, and they're all training like they are, on stage at the Olympia next month. And it's bizarre. Again, someone that grew up in the 80s, I knew what the Olympia was, but that wasn't how I was training in the gym. I wasn't worried about, I wasn't literally posing in the gym at 14, 15 and worrying about whether my most muscular pose was on form. I mean, I despair at how you tap into that. I don't know how you do it. I mean, occasionally I get youngsters email me and say, "Oh, I'm watching your videos and I'm 15 and I run track and I'm thinking of getting the obstacle course racing. I love it. I think, yes, awesome. You do that. You'll be fine." And I put them in front of them people that are like Hunter McIntyre, the obstacle course racing guy, and there's a few guys actually in obstacle course racing, High Rocks World, that are people that could be truly aspirational. They're big, they're strong, they're deadlifting 500 pounds, but they're also running sub 5-minute miles. And I'll say, hey, follow this guy. Stop following the people you're following that couldn't run a mile, let alone a 5-minute mile if their life depended on it. But again, it's like the overweight issue. I can expose myself to a small number of children. That sounds don't use that edit.
That's in the
we'll cut
10
that
minute.
out. We'll cut,
This is why I script
Is that
my
you
YouTube
three knocking
videos.
at your door?
So I can assist.
It's those 70s icons, isn't it?
But you can't get in front of most of them. I mean, again, who knows where that puts us in? Well, we know where it puts us in 10, 15 years time, because those kids get to 22, 23. They're now in a job, in a relationship. They've got responsibilities. They can't keep training like Mr. Olympia. So they stop. And before they know it, they're fat and they're out of shape. And you've got people in their mid-20s that are on a fast track to diabetes in their mid-30s, because they were never training for fitness in the first place. They were training to be Mr. Olympia, which is nonsensical, but they're all doing it. Unless they have parents that are really, really into the world of fitness and proper fitness, and can kind of guide them. Like anything, your parents are guiding you, you're on a better footing. But a lot of them are just going to end up very, very disappointed.
And that
you very nearly quoted the Arnold J. Rimmer thing from the start of Sheriff Fatman there. Like, what, you get to that age, 24, 25, your muscles give up, wave a little white flag. You very nearly quoted that. Brilliant.
But how sad, because what should be happening at 24, 25 is you should be kind of coming into your stride.
Yeah.
You should be not worried. You should be focused on your career. You should be focused on having, healthy relationships. You should be focused on staying in shape. All those things should be starting to knit together nicely. And actually what you're going to have is 25-year-olds all still living at home because they can't afford to do anything else, and realizing that they're not the next Ronnie Coleman, and so stopping what they were doing, and they have no they have no other concept of fitness. It's if I stop cycling tomorrow, I'll row, or I'll kayak, or I'll run, or I'll climb. I'll do a million other things. You say to some kids, you stop standing on the squat rack every day. What do you do instead? That's fitness taken away from me. Then what else is there? Would be their response. I doubt they could even name half of the events in a decathlon, to call back to Daley Thompson. That's let alone do them. That's where we are with youngsters and fitness.
And I think that's it. I suppose it brings us, I think probably, I don't want to take any more of your time, brings us to a nice kind of way around about. It's that gap between the kind of youthful vigor and excitement and the exploration you have as a kid, and something gets lost. And then what happens is that myself, Peter, James, and then you with your videos, you're capturing people as they start to come out the other side, having spent 15, 20 years going, almost like wilderness years, because there's not a huge number of people who reach out in their kind of 20s or early 30s. It's kind of, we find that once people have settled down a little bit and then they suddenly realize, and like you said, with your eating, you don't know what it is that's going to snap you out of that. You don't know what has to have happened. And so I think it's fascinating. I really would say that anyone who's listening to this should subscribe to Mark. Because you never know which one of the videos is going to hit you on the right day. And I think that's what I do like about the YouTube algorithm, is it does fire things slightly randomly, but at times quite presciently to hit you on the day where you're like, actually, I needed that one.
Yeah,
so,
no, it's as I say, I try and the way I come up with ideas is I literally think, what am I thinking about today? And that becomes the video. So like I said, at the moment, I am genuinely pondering, do I need to bother trying to get significantly fitter than I am? And the motivations for that would be what? Well, I can look a bit more jacked in my YouTube thumbnails. Is that really important? It's those sort of concerns, thoughts I'm having at the moment. So that then becomes a video. What is fit enough? And so because
I like that concept. That's a great concept.
Because they're just kind of quite organic thoughts that I would having conversation with mates in the pub. If I was there doing that. They do sometimes hopefully tap into people that are having similar thoughts. It's not very, sometimes YouTube fitness is a little bit cliched, and sometimes, a lot of the time, it's here's a week of my training, or I trained like Chris Hemsworth for 4 days and here's what happened. And it's all this kind of, it's as though you kind of, maybe there might be an app for generating the video title for the most cliched bullshit you can come up with. And they just type that in and then make the video. I just try and think, as a 40-something bloke, what am I thinking about? What am I excited about? What am I worried about? What am I pondering for the future? How do I now make that entertaining?
So how would someone kind of, what's the best way to find you? Obviously on YouTube, just type in Mark Lewis.
I am now luckily substantial enough on YouTube that you can just type in Mark Lewis. It used to be that if you did that, you'd first come up with some weird cello player in a hire or something, but I'm now bigger than he is. So
destroy his career.
Yeah.
Is that downgrade to a violin?
Suck on that cello, boy. So just type in Mark Lewis on YouTube and away you go.
And do you have a website? Do you do anything? Do you have a product?
marklewis.co.uk. On there is stuff like people often ask about what gear I use, and no kind of or very little commercial gain to me, just so that people who are interested can see what I'm using. All my gear is on there. Most of my events that I have coming up are on there. There's also a bit of stuff on there as well about my wife, Jen, because she's recently got into training as similar to me, 30-something woman that hadn't really trained before, is now giving it a bash. So if you're female and thinking there's a lot of testosterone floating around in this conversation, there is a female perspective on there as well. And obviously all the other social media links are on there too.
Fantastic. James, do you want to leave us with anything?
No, just that was a fantastic conversation. In episode 120, I'm amazed it's the first time we've mentioned Toblerone on the show. And Alan it's not the first time we've mentioned Alan Partridge, I don't think.
Oh, that was when you got your new microphone.
Was that Alan Partridge?
Yeah, when he got his gear, his new microphone. Yeah.
No, but that was great, and it was really interesting conversation, Mark, and it was lovely to meet you, and we kind of moved, in a few different directions there, but it was it kind of seemed to flow, and there was logic there somewhere, I think, where we started and where we ended up.
I enjoy it. My YouTube videos are very, very scripted, so that they can be as entertaining as possible. And that I love doing that. I love writing, but occasionally it's nice just to be a bit more free flowing.
Yeah, that's the way we like to run this podcast. So Peter.
Yeah, that was great. I think it's kind of like two halves, isn't it? Because we started out talking about running and all that sort of stuff, and then and then the second half kind of went down the route of like all of the health things behind it and your kind of struggles and stuff like that. I did have a couple of thoughts. One of them was the guy in Africa who you passed. If you had to stop and had a chat, and like, where are you off to? He's like, I forgot the milk. I reckon that would be one of them. So he's like, another 20 miles to go. Gets home.
Actually,
like, where's the milk? It's like, bollocks.
Do you know, I tell you what, I rode in Namibia. I rode to a town called Zwifting, and I passed a guy that was walking there, and I rode into town, and I went to a restaurant, and it's a very small town in Namibia. And I was saying, it's amazing. I said, you got guys that are just walking on the road that I've come in on. And the guy said, it might be such and such. I borrowed his bicycle the other day. So he's come to get his bicycle. And basically, he wasn't sure if it was that particular guy, but certainly one of his friends who lived in the next village had kind of walked 8 hours or something insane to pick up the bicycle that he lent his mate, and then would have cycled it home along these gravel roads. The way that we would pop maybe 3 doors down to pick up a bike he'd lent someone.
Yeah.
This guy walked 8 hours to get his bike back. Different.
It's like an event in itself, isn't it?
The second thing I was going to say, there's a guy on he's on Facebook and Instagram. I don't know his name, but he does like he watches like YouTube videos and Instagram videos and Facebook videos, and then does his own funny ones. And I can't remember his name, but he did one where he was David Goggins' cameraman, and it was hilarious because Goggins is running along, and then it cuts to the other side, and he's got like a mic and a boom, and he's like trying to keep up with him. So look him up as well. Absolutely brilliant. Anyway, no, that was brilliant. That was I love that.
Yeah, well, thank you. So Mark, pleasure talking to you, and I know that we've not met before, so I really appreciate you finding the time to speak to us. Guys, if you're listening to this, as I said, check out Mark. It's definitely worth it. And if you're wondering who else we've had on our podcast, then you can go through in Spotify or any of your major podcast providers and find out some excellent guests on a variety of topics. You can also join our Health Oddity group. In the meantime, please feel free to subscribe or share this podcast, and we'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.